Welcome to Rethink Gaming's Think, Rethink Play podcast with Bob McDowell and Jerry Perkle.
And today's topic is, you won't believe this insane trick for having the best D&D campaign ever.
Ooh. If you want to support this content, please consider joining us on Patreon. Subscribers get a special role in the Discord server, access to all of our content, and a chance for seats at our subscriber-only tables.
All right. So yeah, thanks very much to all of our patrons. Like Bob said, if you want to join us, we'd love to have you. And if you'd like to sponsor us, we also now have a new sponsor tier.
That's right. Come on down. We'd be glad to have you. So, what is the actual topic for today?
So today's topic is Session 0. Clickbait title aside, it's something that can make a game great.
Oh, good. Yeah, I wanted to talk about this one. I was super happy to see it actually published recently in a modern book. But before we dive in, let's do our little introductions.
Who are you?
Well, I'm Bob. I'm currently working on a textbook for how to be a dungeon master. I dabble in fantasy grounds and make the occasional map.
And run like 10 D&D games, right?
Yeah.
And I am Dungeon Maestro Jerry. You can reach me at Dungeon Master J on Twitter. I am Bob's co-conspirator at Rethink Gaming, and I write content mostly for DM's Guild, and I'm also a house DM at RPG Dungeons in Carrollton, Texas. I'm also very busy.
Yep. He runs a very fine game. You should definitely check that out if you're in the neighborhood.
All right.
All right, so if you've never heard of it before, Session 0 is named such because it happens before the first session. And it's best described, I think, as a brief meeting between the players and the Dungeon Master to sort of get everybody on the same page.
Yeah, like anything else like in life, right? It's about setting expectations. If people are on the different pages, have their own ideas about what D&D is, or what your specific game is going to be about,
Right.
that can cause problems and conflict and unnecessary stress.
Right. I've frequently referred to D&D as a team sport before, but in a better example that's a little more pertinent to this, it's kind of like putting a band together, right? You need your drummer and your musicians of all different types. Somebody needs to be able to sing lead and all that. You should probably sit down and talk about it before you get up on stage and do your first performance. I mean, if you've got 3 hair metal guys and a jazz pianist, it's probably not going to go that well.
I would listen to that. That sounds awesome. And some of the music I've listened to also, like, they don't have to be able to sing to be in the band.
Yeah. I was actually specifically recruited into a band in high school because I could not play any instruments. They didn't want me to have too much of the limelight.
Yes, the tambourine man.
Right. Anyway, so have you run into scenarios pertaining to either having a good session 0 or maybe not having one? You got any war stories to share with us today?
I have a few. Let me tell you. I'll go back to the same story actually that I've talked about in a couple episodes now. That one fateful high school game with that poor DM Jake. Him and I were, I think, the only ones that had any experience with D&D. He was trying to DM. I don't know. There must have been 10 of us, maybe, which is a lot, especially for high school kids, right? It was very unruly. No one really knew what was going on going into it. Everyone was nice and patient while building their characters. That took a couple hours, but by the time we started playing, it was late, and yeah, it fell to pieces.
So, what were some of the things that kind of happened where people were obviously not on the same page?
A couple of things actually. I mean, just one of them, just behavior at the table, right?
Okay.
And a big part of it was people just not understanding the game, right? Like it was new to a lot of people, and being able to wrangle people, obviously very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah, talking out a turn, which is of course okay within limits, and just kind of general behavior, right? They were rambunctious. I think a couple of guys started a pool game in the middle of the D&D game, so
Okay.
in the same room, so it's a little
Right.
a little
Why are
distracting.
we in this room? That's a great question to have.
Yeah, a couple guys ran off, got food, didn't bring any Taco Bell back, which is
Ooh,
a sin, right?
gotta
Yeah,
share. Gotta share.
yeah. What about you? Any good stories?
I actually had a campaign go completely off the rails. I shut it down
Mm-hmm.
for lack of having a session zero conversation. I was
Mm-hmm.
running the old Dragon Mountain box set. Wonderful, wonderful piece of work from the old TSR crew. Basically, you go to you locate a dragon's lair, go in there, confront it, kill it, take the treasure. Right? It's a typical sort of stereotypical almost picture people have in their minds when they think of Dungeons and Dragons, but it was played out through this fantastic box set. There were all these quirks and all this wonderful stuff. I really, really wanted to run it. The party we had put together had a number of different characters, and it was pretty eclectic. One of them was a centaur, and she was kind of a druid type. Very attuned with nature and very, very much playing a character. And the player acted very strongly, a lot of emotion in her speech and such.
Mm-hmm.
And we got into this confrontation, and it was one of those scenarios. I was younger, maybe a little less experienced, but uh, the party was confronted with a group that was the obviously superior group. And basically, it was a group of paladins, clerics, and knights that were also going to get this dragon, right? They were on its way.
Mm-hmm.
So the party, they're having an argument with this uh, opposing party, this rival party, if you will. And I just flippantly, speaking in character, throw out, "Have you even slain a dragon before? Because we have, and we're capable of doing this." Well, the player immediately breaks out her backstory. "What do you mean you've slain a dragon? That's completely unforgivable." And she initiates a combat on the basis that anyone who would dare harm a majestical creature of nature, such as a dragon, needed to die immediately. And it was a TPK because,
Hmm.
again, completely insurmountable force. Combat was ensued. Nobody was ready, etc. And we played the thing through. I think one player snuck away at the very last moment. And I sat down at the end of that with her and I said, "You realize this is a campaign about killing a dragon, right?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably should have
Yeah.
probably should have talked about that before
Sure.
character creation.
And there's other times, that running like a formal session zero, it's not really even possible, right? Like, have you ever done any of the D&D Adventures League stuff? Pick up at a comic shop. I don't know if you've done any of that stuff, but you're playing with
Yeah.
literal strangers every single week. I don't think I played with the same group twice ever doing Adventures League when I did that back in
I
the day.
haven't done it. I do know that some of the organized play, almost all of them, will have a set of table rules that kind of makes default assumptions to a lot of the
Mm,
topics that are going to be on your session zero list.
mm,
But I do agree that it's not well known to most of the players at the table, and I bet it's a very inconsistent experience depending on which night you go or which place you go to, right?
mm. Sure. All right. So, what is this session zero? What specifically is it that we're talking about here?
Well, it was recently approached in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and I was so happy to see it there. I think I
Hmm.
messaged you when I flipped to that page in the book, and I said, it's only been 20 something years we've been talking about this online, and it finally made it into print. If anybody knows of another book that formally addressed it, it's not like a forum post or something, please let us know in the comments or however you want to get a hold of us, because I'd love to go and look at that. If I've seen it before and can't think of it,
Hmm.
I'd be a little surprised. But again, I was just excited to see it. She puts it in there. Before making characters or playing the game, the DM and players can run a special session, colloquially called Session Zero, to establish expectations, outline the terms of a social contract, and share house rules. Making and sticking to these rules can help ensure that the game is a fun experience for everyone involved.
Sure. Does it go into any detail on, what you do during session 0?
Yeah, it's not as much as I'd like to see,
Mhm.
especially because predating this book are some really solid lists online,
Sure.
and we'll go over what I use for my 3 games that I'm running right now. Um, it talks about party formation,
Mhm.
specifically how they know each other and so forth. Not as much about making sure your character is aligned, which people have mixed feelings about, right, Jerry?
Mhm.
But more like, why are you friends? That's been a table rule of mine for a long time. Um, and I'll often give that advice online. If you have a disruptive character, maybe the player is a problem, maybe not. But if the character is absolutely a loner or is, you know, chaotic evil or has turned that way because of in-game events, that totally makes sense. It makes sense for the character. That character can be okay, but for
Mhm.
my table, I would stop and say, hey, you've got a really cool character concept there. Why don't you put it on the shelf? Come back next week with a character that fits in this group.
Are we talking about the edgelord again?
Yeah, yeah. Going back
The
to that, if
good
you
old
haven't listened to
edgelord.
episode 3, that's a great way to deal with that character.
Mhm.
Because yeah, you could have like a reasonably normal character with a family who's healthy and alive, and they get slaughtered in game, and he's like, "Oh, I must go alone to avenge them." Cool. Let that character ride off into the sunset, right?
There you go. It's a
Um,
good place for him.
the book next goes into the social contract, specifically talking about hard and soft limits.
Mhm.
Um, a while back, the X card was very popular, which was simply put a icon on the table. They specifically recommended a card, and a player doesn't have to state that they're uncomfortable. They just have to point at the card, and everybody at the table knows that you need to change the subject.
Sure.
Um, some advantages and disadvantages to that. One key advantage is you don't have to make a laundry list of everything that bothers you,
Mhm.
which some people are uncomfortable with doing. And you may not realize something's going to bother you until it happens either.
Right.
Then it
So
talks
that's
about game
was there
customization and house rules, and it just kind of wraps
oh,
up there. The list goes on and on in things that you
mhm.
probably should talk about first. So this is a good start, I would say.
Sure. So a couple things there. I like the word they called a social contract, right? We're not talking about a legal contract here, but like, hey, like we all agree to do these things this way. And also the limits, right? I was reading and I stumbled on something on Twitter. It's called the Tabletop RPG Safety Toolkit Guide. It's
Okay.
by a couple individuals like Kiana Shaw and Lauren Brian Monk. And yeah, it mentions the X cards that you just alluded to. But I have a little quote here. The toolkit is a living resource meant to change as safety tools and the conversations around them develop and grow. It goes on to outline some specific things to make people sure everyone's on the same page and comfortable at the table.
Hmm.
So this is a co-curated list. Um, like I said, with a couple of these tools. Um, and it goes over things like so running safe games, having regular check-ins, and promoting things like open communication and care. Right. So you mentioned the hard and soft limits. In this, they call it lines and veils, which I thought was good terminology. A line is a hard limit on content. It's literally where you draw the line, where you don't go. So me personally, mine are children and dogs. Don't go there. Anything else is pretty much fair game for me, right?
Right, right.
And then veils, right? That's what do you want okay with, but you want to happen behind the curtain. Like where do you fade to black? Like for me, like weird intimacy, romance stuff, like it's not a part of like the fantasy game experience for me, right? Fade to black and we'll call it done. Couple of things it goes over is a script rating. I like this idea a lot. Is everyone in for a PG-13 experience, a rated R experience? Me personally, again, I like playing games that are rated Quentin Tarantino, right?
Right.
So,
Say what
yeah,
again?
exactly. And a lot of people just kind of aren't on that same page. I actually took over a game for another DM last week, and yeah, one of the players was actually had a family member at the table, so you'd think that might calm someone down, maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I'm dying
I
to
felt
know. Did it
like
calm them down?
no,
Oh, okay.
absolutely not. Um, I felt like this person was crossing my lines, so that's the important thing to consider, right? These lines aren't only for the players, right? It's for the DM as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
it goes on, mentions X card system uh, that you talked about a little bit. There's the X card, of course, which means that you're not comfortable. Stop right there. And I think at RPG Dungeons they have the X cards printed out. There is an N card, which means that they feel like you're heading down the path to the X card. So fade to black. It's a no, like don't go there, right? And
Okay.
then
Like a
oh,
yellow light.
right. And then an O card, which is keep going. It's okay to continue. So if you're
Ah.
sensitive about something and the DM's kind of like skirting the line there, and you want to kind of encourage, or the other players are like, hey, that's okay. You're not going too far there. Um, if it's near one of your lines, you can opt to keep going if you're okay
Yeah.
with how things are proceeding.
Interesting. So that's evolved some
Yeah,
since I've run into it last, or else
yeah.
I've forgotten. Both are possible.
They also throw out kind of an alternate system, I guess it is, and it's the script change toolbox. This is kind of like old VCR buttons, right, or cassette tape buttons. There's a rewind. So something happened, not comfortable with it. Let's go back, talk about that, talk about why it's not okay.
Okay.
Fast forward button. Let's just skip this. A pause button, like, hey, this is getting intense. Let's stop and go over this. And then resume button, just let's continue.
Yeah.
It also goes in and talks about all sorts of things like built-in breaks for long, intense sessions, something called the Luxton technique, and a couple more things. Um,
Interesting.
s- Something also is interesting that they talked about is after the game, right? There's a concept of bleed, where people should be conscious of their feelings, emotions, the stress that can bleed over after the game, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you want to stop, talk about that, or take a little break after the game. Make sure it doesn't affect you after the fact. Um, and I guess from my perspective, if as a DM you're doing this, like you're causing, uh, this kind of reaction from your players, you're
Yeah.
probably doing a great job. You're probably a great storyteller. And we're not talking about like traumatizing someone,
Right.
but just making them really feel the story and be involved with it. Like that's a great thing, right? That's probably role playing at its best, in my opinion. Also goes into aftercare, debriefing, or just check-ins, and then something called stars and wishes, which are just reflections, right?
Hmm.
So stars are what did you like? That's GM or players, like what stuck out. That's a great conversation to have, even outside of kind of game safety, right? Like good feedback to your DM is a good
Sure.
thing, right? Like if you like a certain thing that they do, they will turn the knob on that one up, right?
Right.
And then
Yeah, it's super important to keep those lines of communication up. And as a DM, you need to solicit that feedback from time to time as well, just so the players are reminded that you're open to it. Yeah.
exactly. And then the final thing here is wishes. Like, what do you want to see? Right? Maybe you're the character that, or the player that's got the character with the 3-page backstory that you want to see develop. Right? You've written the start of the story, but you want to see the outcome of the story. That's another great place for that as well.
Yeah.
So some really great like topics here. I was pretty surprised when I stumbled upon it because it's so well developed. Right? And I will throw a link to that Twitter post where they kind of promoted that, probably on our Patreon page. That's a good place for it. You think, Bob?
Yeah.
Maybe on Facebook as well.
Yeah. I think those are both great places for it. And thank you. That'll help me go and find it too, because I want to brush up. Like I said, I feel like maybe it's evolved since I've seen it last.
Sure. And also, there's some thinking there, like how can you apply this to your, your online games, right? It mentions a couple things like the, especially with the script change, the cassette tape buttons, right? Like just typing that into a chat.
Yeah,
That's definitely a good way to do it. Also, hey, text message. If you're GM someone who keeps the phone around during a game, like, if you want to be more discreet or private, and you
hmm
get their attention that way, like that's great. Also, just calling a timeout when you're playing, right? Saying, "Hey, need a restroom break," and then pull the GM or the player aside that you know might be going too far, might be violating that contract, and say, "Hey, can
right.
we can we go back to where we agreed as a group?"
I think it probably always needs to be the DM involved. Groups can decide otherwise, but it would be my advice to let the DM wear their manager hat
Mm-hmm.
if you have an issue with another player, for example. Um, I wouldn't try taking that on directly unless you just felt like you were really going to be clutch with it. But
I mean, yes and no, right? It depends. I mean, you got to know the people you're playing with, right? But certainly, if you're in one of these situations where you're playing in a public setting, or not someone that you know very well, or it's a little bit too far and you're not even comfortable, and you're kind of fearing, retribution. You're just not comfortable. Definitely, you have to be able to trust that manager, as you say.
yeah, it's part of the job. Being a DM means wearing a lot of hats, and that's just kind of
Mm-hmm.
one of them, in my opinion. But if you're friends or you know each other, have history, it's probably more efficient just to take it up with them directly. And because of that relationship with you, they'll be respectful of your wishes. Like that, you don't want all your friends to hate you. That's how you get your tires slashed. So yeah,
Speaking from experience, there.
no, no, yeah, cool.
Mm.
Yeah, we'll look for those links on the socially do's. That's going to be really good to go review. Um, Now, I will say my um, take on session zero is also a little more practical
Mm-hmm.
than that. And the advice I am routinely handing out online is you should have had a session zero, stop right now and have one, right?
Yeah.
You should have discussed this in session zero. Here are some example questions. The first and most popular one, at least for an online game,
Mm-hmm.
if not in general, is when do we not play? Right? That's a big one. I suppose we could tackle the lists in order if you want. We can kind of go through the differences in the three groups. For those who haven't heard the podcast before, I do a game on Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. Excuse me. They're all Discord fantasy grounds. Two of them are streamed and the recordings are up on the YouTubes. Um, so it's a very similar framework for all of them. Jerry's a player in the Sunday game, was a player for a while in the Monday game, but as he said, he's a busy guy. So um, the first thing I'll do is do scheduling, and because I do the published campaigns, right, the three icons on the screen on the video version of this now are the three games that we're running. And because I do it online and the published campaign, I definitely point out early that this is going to be a long haul. We also play
Mm-hmm.
short sessions, like 2 hours, so it's going to take a year probably
Yeah. At
to
least,
finish a published book, right? Maybe a little less, but you
or a
should
little more,
plan
right?
for a year. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
So just
that's
know that it's a commitment, right? It's not buying a
yes.
puppy, but it's significant.
Yeah, and as we talk about what nights you can play and so forth, you need to know
Mm-hmm.
that up front. I actually, from the Monday group, had a player drop for that reason. He tried it a couple games and he's like, I understand the commitment. I don't think I can keep up. So he bowed out. Um,
Sure.
then we talk about frequency of play. My schedule is somewhat firm because I've got the 3 nights with openings. Um, and we usually play 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., right? The Sunday group, though, felt that once weekly was a little too frequent and they needed some Sundays open. So we only play the first 3 Sundays of the month. We kind of have to run a calendar to help me keep track of that. But, it's a little variability in the schedule there. But that way you've got a few Sundays to do some things. As long as the group all agrees and everybody knows what to expect, it works. That's kind of why it makes the list.
Sure.
Um, we talk about how long to wait to begin, right? How late is absent? And it
Hmm.
kind of sounds like school and tardies and such, but it's just sort of polite. One, to agree on that up front, and two, it lets you know what the expectation is for, well, hey, they took off without me. Well, we agreed 10 minutes, and on all three of my groups in that particular topic said, we're going to wait 10 minutes. If you're not there 10 minutes, just start the game without me. Next one was the session will be canceled or rescheduled if the DM is absent, right? Kind of
Hmm.
hard to run without me.
Sure.
Um, two of the groups said if two players are absent. The Sunday group says three players are absent before we cancel. Then what do you do with that player? Or a character whose player is not there.
Hmm.
The Sunday group only agreed to letting that character being played by another specified player. The others leave it kind of up to the DM. We can make them inactive, we can put them on follow, so to speak.
Hmm.
And they look to me to sort of make that call. I've got some standard rules that come next, and again, this is kind of just reading these out. But I guess if I had a group that really wanted to disagree with them, um, we could talk about it. Maybe though I wouldn't want to run the game. So as a DM, you do have a little bit of muscle in that because like if you want to run a game that's more serious and they all want to behave like idiots,
Hmm.
you don't have to, right? Some people will say bad D&D is not better than no D&D. I don't know. I go back and forth.
It just depends.
Yeah,
Well,
because
nowadays it's a lot easier, right? I don't know, it
true,
seems that way to me. I don't know what it is, but back in the day, it was like you just were hurting for players. You know, like literally begging anyone to play D&D with you, right, to get that group together. Nowadays,
right.
for whatever reason, like it's a lot easier, at least in this area, to find players. So, especially you run your games online, so you have a wide geographic area.
I do, and as mentioned, sign up for Patreon. You'll get a seat when we start the next one.
There we go.
Looking forward to see what kind of group we can put together out of that. I think there'll be an enthusiastic set, but
I want to get in on the next Curse of Strahd game.
oh yeah, I will turn
I don't
around and run that.
care.
I'll start that tomorrow if we want to do that tomorrow. I love that one so much. I got a review on deck. Watch
Yeah.
for that, where I just gush with love for that game. So good.
And he does a
Uh,
cheesy vampire voice.
oh yeah, I have my terrible accents. I'm so good at terrible accents. Everybody from Saltmarsh
That's a
sounds like they're from North Dakota, by the way. Just I don't know why. That's just the way it is. Let's
Is
see.
that what that
Table
was?
expectations.
Sorry, go ahead.
So next, I just read out the participants are expected to behave like adults, eat and drink appropriately, blah blah blah. Right. This is it's kind of table stakes. But again, you could say it, and somebody's like, "Oh, hey, I only play D&D if I'm drunk."
Hmm.
Well, great. This might not be the group for you, right? I'm expecting you to be sober enough to play, and we're
Sure.
not going to stop the game because you're blackout drunk. I
Hmm.
haven't run into this personally, but I have read about it online. um, and again, it's about matching those expectations. I
Right.
do D&D kind of like it's a job. So,
Same. Like people
yeah,
pay me for this. Like I want to be in like pretty good shape to at least run a game.
right,
Playing a game, I could see having a couple beers or something, but I'm not going to get hammered and
right.
play Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, and I don't want to put up with playing with somebody who is. I
Yeah.
mean, the next one for table expectations varies a little bit more.
Hmm.
I actually have three different spectrums in this bandwidth for player versus player action.
Mm,
Okay. My Monday night group has a lot of newer players in it. And so in that one, player versus player action is not acceptable, right?
okay.
Try not to use character powers or skills to manipulate the other players.
Hmm.
And in that one, also, character secrets are kept to a minimum and expected to come out eventually. So, the players that are stealing things behind the back or have a stash of dynamite hidden somewhere in the house, the table rules say the other players are going to use that out of character knowledge against you, and that's okay.
It's an
Um,
oddly specific example.
it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
God, I wish that game was streamed. Um, so the Tuesday night game, this is a game full of a whole bunch of young men. They're all personal friends,
Mhm.
and they are indifferent toward player versus player action. Um, and they're indifferent to character secrets. They all trust each other. I trust them to not get into squabbles about it. Fine. We're not going to decide during session 0 how we want to approach this. We'll handle it as it comes up, case by case. I'm okay with that too, right? As long
Sure.
as we've discussed it and we know what to expect, it's
Yeah,
not been a
and
problem.
that group of guys, I've DM'd for them, most of them, twice now. They've played a lot together, and I think you're actually DMing their old full-time DM as a player right now.
Right.
So they're all kind of on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the oddball in that group, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Sunday group says the player versus player character action or player versus player action is allowed if supported by the role play.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's Rime of the Frost Maiden, character secrets are actually required in that particular
Right.
game. So
And
yeah,
I don't feel like it's out of control in that game either. It's the one that I play in, of course. So yeah,
it's
I think
not.
maybe one player takes it a little far.
Well, there are some secrets that um, have never come up, which is a little
Mm-hmm.
disappointing. I need to try and leverage that a little better. And then there's one
Sure.
that comes up all the time, and only me and that player know about it. And it's really weird because it's on the streams. You'll be able to hear it when you finally discover it, and perhaps we'll do a
Mm-hmm.
wrap session and just reveal all of our secrets at the end because everybody gets a bonus. It's possible inspiration source, right, for playing
Mm-hmm.
role playing your character secret well.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, it's gonna be like, oh, okay, it's a really interesting one.
Mine
Um,
is always on the back of my mind, but it hasn't come out.
yeah,
So
yeah, yours is really good.
sure.
So yeah, we talk about how I make rulings, um, talk about agency, all that kind of stuff. I'm not gonna bore you guys with that list. One other difference between the different groups is the rating of the
Mm-hmm.
particular game. We use TV and movie ratings.
Right.
Most of our games TVMA. The Sunday night game has an occasional observer who's 9 years old, so we agreed to go PG-13 for that game.
Yep. It's someone's son who walks up at random inconvenient times because there's no
Yep.
door in the office or something.
Well, and he likes D&D, and I
For
love to
sure.
encourage kids getting into the game, so I'm a sucker for that, I guess. But
So, how do you run these session zeros? Do you do them, you know, is it a live thing? You're all talking at the same time? Do you, I mean, how do you do it?
basically like a meeting. We get
Yeah.
everybody together, we kind of go through the list, we take notes. As conversations spill out, you kind of let that go off into its little tangent and spin down
Hmm.
that rabbit hole a while. Then you pull it back in to the list and finish getting it filled out.
Sure. So, I handled mine a little differently, the campaign that I started a couple months ago now. Um, since it's taking place at, you know, this shop where people are paying for a certain set amount of time to play this game, I
Right.
didn't want to, basically waste their money doing a session zero, but I still think it's a very important thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
My list is probably about half as long as yours, but hits the main topics I think that I need to get a feel for the group. And I actually just sent out a survey.
Yeah.
um, and it worked fine. I got responses from everyone, and then we had Discord there to kind of we have our own little private group, and we were discussing, negotiating. Luckily, everyone's on the same page with most things.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted certain things to be crystal clear because It's actually an evil campaign, so evil characters, which I was very nervous to do at first because it can go horribly wrong. It's generally considered a bad idea,
Mhm.
but it's going great. It's a lot of fun so far. So yeah, a couple different ways to crack that nut, right? The interactive live feedback is very good, but in some situations, especially when you're talking about kind of what are my lines and my veils, or what are my hard limits,
Mhm.
sometimes people just don't want to talk about that,
Right.
so it might be best to send that to a DM privately, and the DM communicates out like, hey, we don't go there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's definitely
yeah.
one of the advantages of playing online. You talked about text messaging.
Mhm.
One of my instructions is message me privately. Um,
Right.
in Fantasy Grounds, you can whisper me or you can Discord me as well because we're using both.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's always there. Like they can talk directly to me. Hopefully, I'll see it right away. I do have three screens and kind of a lot going on, but
Mhm.
mostly I'm responsive to that. In person, like you're doing over there at RPG Dungeons, that's obviously not an option, right? Or less so. Text message, I guess, but it would be very obvious that this person texted that person who received it. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, the whole party, except for I believe two of the players, use D&D Beyond. The other
so
two
they're on their
players are,
phones for the character sheet anyway.
yeah, or a tablet or something,
Yeah.
and two of them are still pen and paper. I converted one person to Beyond. She
Okay.
built a character, and she's like, "That was criminally easy to build a character in D&D Beyond." I'm like, "Yeah, like
Yeah. Hashtag not sponsored, but man, that is amazing software. And I don't know how we got
it's
so
pretty
far
good."
into D&D without that, right?
Did we already talk about the CD-ROM? I think we mentioned that already. Um, yeah, the old advanced Dungeons and Dragons character builder on CD-ROM for
Yeah.
Windows 95. Yeah, it was good. It was
Yeah.
buggy. It fell over a lot, but
Yeah, there
even
was
that
one
was a
in
huge
the old
improvement.
third edition books that they
Hmm.
did a launch with the books and then never updated it again.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Oh, let's see if there's anything else important on this. I have this list. I
Hmm.
could share it if you want it. Just ask. I recommend you develop your own.
Yeah.
Um, but let's see. Ratings we talked about. Oh, we go over house rules, what
Mm.
content is available, what level we're starting at, how I want you to do your character stats, all that sort of stuff. So that you don't make a character. So I don't have to approve your character as long as I can trust that you did what I said.
Hmm.
Um, you roll in here with character we play, so I don't have to do like character
Yeah.
sheet audits. That's more convenient than anything else, but it tells everybody else at the table also what is and isn't going to be allowable. Some people care a lot about what the other characters might be, and some don't. So, you might have to read the room a little bit for that one. Um, how you're going to handle alignment, what you're going to
Yeah.
award inspiration for, and then the last one on the list is, do we want to stream this game?
Hmm.
Because I do that thing, right? Not everybody
Right.
does, but
What kind of things do you talk about for content?
as far as allowed content,
Yeah.
mostly I am very open.
Hmm.
Even with Tasha's and all of the quote unquote drama, and I disagree that some of that is actual drama. Uh, it's fine. So I used to run a game by Kevin Sabita, but Palladium Press called Riffs, and I don't know if
Hmm.
you've ever heard of this, but it's a kitchen sink game, and I mean it. Um, in the character, the base book, like not splat books, but in the core RPG book, you can play a vagabond who is literally a nobody with no skill to speak of and no redeeming qualities, or a guy who starts the game with a suit of power armor.
Okay.
These characters are supposed to be in the same party. Uh, if that's what the players want, that's what the players get, right? There's magic, sonics, um, and if you start bringing in other books, you can have superheroes and fantasy characters and all this kind of stuff. And on top of that, Rifts has this concept of what they call mega damage, which does
Hmm.
100 times more hit point damage than normal damage would be. And inversely, mega damage armor is immune to hit point damage. So you have guys having gunfights with laser blasters that can level houses, more powerful than tank rounds
Mm-hmm.
that they're carrying on their hip. And you want to talk about the concept of game balance in that
What?
particular setting, just forget it, right? I mean, it's not a thing in that game. It's gonzo by definition. So you want to say, oh man, the rogue can stand still and get advantage now. That does not impress me.
I don't know. I think I would build Space Conan in that system,
Oh
and he would
yeah.
be awesome. Yeah.
Additionally, not sponsored, but looking at Ultra Modern 5, and man, that got me wanting to play some riffs.
Yeah.
Use the setting material and the 5e rule set that I was looking at last night. That looks really good. So if you're familiar with that system, shout out to me. I want to know what your experiences are with it. But I mean, literally, I was like, "Ooh, there's mutant animals. Are there turtles? Yes. Oh, martial artist, ninja. Oh my God, Ninja Turtles."
Uh you and the damn Ninja Turtles, man. Like I don't.
Hey, I grew up in the '90s. What do you want?
Yeah, me too. But I got over it. uh, I really think it was Vanilla Ice that killed it for me.
Oh no,
Go
Vanilla
Ninja
Ice
Go.
was hot, man. That was awesome. My
Yeah,
older
no, that.
brother actually shaved the pips in his eyebrows. Yep, that was something to
Wow.
see.
Yeah, as soon as Vanilla Ice was in, I was out. Right, I was like, I can't do this Ninja Turtle thing anymore.
He's from Dallas, isn't he? Or performed here in his early career.
We don't talk about that.
All right, all right.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I did go to the Reddits today to say,
Okay.
hey, we're doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions? And really, no, nobody had any questions about Session Zero. They were talking, though, about some things that we don't typically get into.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of them suggested that the people talk about themselves, like basic real life info, saying, I'm Bob, I'm an IT professional, da 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 da, right? So that they can get some kind of an understanding of the background of the other people who are at the table. That one was new to me. I'd not ever heard that suggested before.
And not a terrible idea, actually. So kind of some of our regular groups, like where we know the people, like you obviously wouldn't do that, right? But we brought some new blood in, and I even have trouble telling a couple of the newer players apart, right? Because I don't know them, I don't know anything about them.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
interesting.
and it's totally my fault because I'm kind of the common thread between most of them. But as we do our next subscriber table, it's definitely a great idea because
Yeah.
some of these would be strangers to all of us.
Or even write up a paragraph, a quick bio. Send me
Right.
your LinkedIn profile.
Right? We need like
No.
LinkedIn for RPGs. That would be amazing.
Yeah. What's
So,
your role playing resume?
right? And you could like log all your plays in there and who you played with. Oh, it'd be amazing. Somebody should do this. Who are you? Whoever's listening to this right now, go make that website so I can sign up. I
Yeah.
would do it, but I don't need another job.
Yeah. It's like, do I need another project?
No, no, not really. Uh,
Yeah.
some basic stuff like the background of the campaign and what classes and stuff do you allow, and all that stuff is kind of table stakes as far as I'm
Hmm.
concerned. I will point out that if you're a dungeon master and you've already answered the question, but the question is being asked again or in a different way, this means your player is interested in that topic or interested in pressing that boundary, exploring it,
Hmm.
basically. And so that might be a not red flag, maybe a yellow flag. So if you've already said only these classes will be allowed and only these races will be allowed, and they say, well, can I play an elf? Well, no, because we said we're only doing orcs and they all have to be bards because we're having an orchestra or whatever. Um, if they're pressing that limit, uh, you know, take note and have that conversation before you start or before they show up with a character that they can't have.
Have you ever done that before? A race restriction or a class restriction?
Have I ever personally done that? No, no, I can't think
I've
of a
never
single
done
time I've
that.
done that.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, no,
I can see why you would.
yeah,
Maybe you're in a world where all the humans have tragically nearly destroyed themselves. So there's very few humans. It's a very rare thing.
right.
Um, yeah, I could see story wise, especially a homebrew campaign, why you would do that. But yeah, interesting.
Well, like when we play Star Wars, we kind of need to choose like which faction or unaligned are we, right? We can't have some rebels and some Imperials in the same group.
Hmm.
Um, so that would be close to a restriction. But just as a group, we make that decision. It's like, which way do you want this campaign to go? Um, I've advised people before. They're like, "Oh, I really want to start them all in prison, or I really want to, do this like jailbreak campaign." And then that's a session zero conversation, in my opinion. And like I said earlier, you can stop the game, excuse me, or you can, when you sit down next to play, have a conversation about one of these topics, or point out something in the rules that you think needs to be changed or discussed again because behavior hasn't matched it. Um, so it's not a one and done thing. It doesn't have to be just because it's zero and zero comes first. You could do it again. You could revisit it, and it's never too late to do one. If you are in a
Hmm.
group right now and you don't remember having this conversation with your fellow players and dungeon master, suggest that you do. There's no harm in it. Even if you just sit down to write what you're currently doing, at
Hmm.
least you've gone through the check boxes and everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, it could prevent future issues, right? And that's a good thing, as a again talked about, DM wearing the manager hat. Great advice, right? Like periodically review it. Make sure you are following the rules, or make sure that you are,
Yeah,
guiding the players in the right way, to how you kind of agreed. And things change
absolutely.
over time, right? You can get more or less comfortable with the group. Like, hey, that guy over there, like he goes, way over the line. Like it's too far, you know.
Yeah,
Um, and maybe they're a creative deviant and they go places where you couldn't even thought of in a
right.
session zero.
Yeah,
Um,
there's some content that's probably not PG-13 in our Sunday games that comes up fairly repeatedly, and I won't repeat
mhm,
it here. But if you want to go watch that stream, you'll pick up on it pretty fast. And I did kind of think about adding that to the list for next time.
mhm.
Um, I don't know how I feel about it. I just feel like it hurts the seriousness just a little bit, but um, yeah, that was borderline for me. I don't know why.
Yeah, I can't think of what it is. Like even a little bit. So like, it's obviously not, you know, approaching any of my lines.
Yeah.
Wait, is it me? Did I do the thing?
No, no, no.
Oh, okay.
It's the satyr and his
Ah,
proclivities.
such a great character.
Is a great character.
But anyways.
um, so usually about now is
Mhm,
when we'll come back and sort of foil our own point, um,
mhm.
and we'll say, "Oh, well, but what about?" I kind of want to break with tradition on this one, though. I don't know of any reason why you would not do this, and I've already on record as advising you to stop what you're doing and do it right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page with you here. But I would caveat like this doesn't have to be a huge formal ordeal, right? Do what works for your group.
Right.
Um, and the regular check-in advice is great. Periodically review this. Um, yeah, that's so. Like I said, it's great advice. You should definitely do it. How you do it, and to what extent you do it, that's really up to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It should be custom to you and your group. Um,
Hmm.
a lot of people do what I do, get a pattern, you use it, you get a checklist and use it, but you go grab somebody else's checklist and they're going to be concerned about things that maybe you're not. And they may leave off things like scheduling, which can be
Hmm.
super important, right? So, yeah,
So I mean,
put a little
huge
thought into it.
conflict of D&D, right? I mean, I remember a meme that's like this. It's a spoof on the Council of Elrond from Lord of the Rings. It's like we'll play on Tuesday. Yes, Tuesday. Then you have Gimli. Tuesday's no good for me.
Yeah,
It's yeah. It's scheduling is it can be a challenge, especially the older your players get, the more commitments they have. the less time there seems to be in the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to make
But,
sure you're on the same page there.
to laud the system just a little bit, I have 3 active games right now. Obviously, am a grown-up adult, as are all of my players. I got 18 people playing D&D through this little setup we've
Mm-hmm.
got going on here right now. It can work. So regular D&D is not possible. No, it's totally possible.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be on the same page, and I recommend having a role where you play without a few of the people.
Absolutely. But for that, you kind of do need the slightly larger groups, right? Um, I won't recommend 8-9 players like Bob likes to play with, but um, 6 is not a terrible number.
No, it's
So
not, especially as people are busy. Now, on the
yeah.
flip side, if you are at a table where you've only got 2 players, you still want to play, you could run a side quest, or that would be a good campaign to encourage people to really dig into their backstories, because that goes to like splitting the party. Well, the party just split
Mm-hmm.
itself for that night by 2 of them not showing up or something. So it could work.
Yeah, and I've actually done that exact trick, the side quest. We actually did a prequel, and kind of filled in some color in a character's backstory, and at the same time giving more context to the rest of the campaign. So
Mhm.
yeah, good advice.
So I do have a question here that I found online that I think we can kick around for just a minute, because it's a little bit on topic, and I want to pull it back to the topic. It's sabotage, it really is. But Barbara on Facebook says, "What do you consider rules lawyering? Is it ever okay?"
hmm. So I guess kind of what you're getting at here is, should you talk about rules lawyering in your session 0, right? I think it's a perfectly valid topic, right? You kind of mentioned how you handle it. You're like, my ruling goes, we'll talk about it after.
Right.
I'm actually happy to have a very quick debate at the table, but if it drags on, I'm making the call and we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
And we'll just
Yeah.
try and be consistent later. Um,
Yeah. I'm very close to that as well.
mhm.
I make a ruling, but just like a judge behind the bench, they may throw out an objection. I'll give them a sentence or two to state their case, and we move on, right? So, um, it's not a ruling without input, I don't think. If I ever do that to my players, please call me on it. But yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. What about rules lawyering? Well, you picked a word I can't say apparently. Anyways, about session 0 rules.
Yeah, that's not okay. The spirit of a session 0, and
Hmm.
the agreement that you come out of there with, is that everyone has consented to this thing we're about to do.
Hmm.
Um, if you think that there's wiggle room in that, you're not being honest about having agreed to it, in my opinion.
Or, I mean, devil's advocate here, like, was it clear enough in session 0? You know?
Yeah, true, and that can go into the feedback loop of let's nail it down, right?
Mhm.
Let's drill into this and decide. Yeah, true.
Yeah, and advice to that is, like anything else, like, be cool, have fun.
Yeah,
It's a game, right?
it's supposed to be fun.
um, yep. If it's not, you're messing it up. You're doing it wrong. All right, here's another question from Facebook from someone named Andrew. Is it ever okay to kick players from the table for causing the DM general grief? Would a DM be considered a jerk if it considered kicking a destructive player from the table?
Um, no, not really. Considered, for sure, is totally legit. Um, I wouldn't do it just recklessly. I would have a conversation first. If the person is in violation of the session 0 agreement, then you've got some firm legs to stand on. Especially
Hmm.
if you know they are the only one who um, is in violation. If it's not the whole group, maybe wants to reconsider. If it's this one person that's already been talked to about this and just isn't fitting in,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I think that is a fine reason to say, I think you should go your own way. Or when I
Mm-hmm.
want to run a game of that type later on down the road, you're going to be the first person I call.
Yeah, and it can it's a tough situation, right? But ideally, a lot of these things that you talk about in a session 0, right, would mitigate this or even prevent this issue from occurring, right? They
Yeah.
should be on the same page. They shouldn't, be harassing you basically.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where I was going from the start.
Hmm.
If you have an agreement up front, it's kind of a contract, but then somebody who's going against that wants to make a change. And we either need to change the agreement or change the participants. I think it's pretty clear. And I don't think you're a jerk for looking at it that way.
Yeah, very good point.
Well,
All
I
right.
think we've just about touched all the bases on our little home run here. Again, super important topic to me, something near and dear to my heart. I've been doing it for a long time. I learned something new tonight, which I love to do. Uh, if you've got any questions, you want to discuss anything
Or
about
if you want
this
to
with
argue,
us,
you can also argue.
I do argue. I do like to argue. Um, you know, I'm trying to behave these days, but it's so hard. It's so hard not to just lay into people because of a masterful argument.
There you go. All
But
right.
please
So,
do come and talk to us. We love to talk about this stuff. We'd love
absolutely.
to have people on our podcast and come and bring in a fresh perspective. So consider doing that as well, please.
Yeah, we have a couple of ideas there too. We're throwing out the idea of doing a ladies' night,
Mhm.
uh, kind of open mic for the ladies. That sounds like a lot of fun.
We've got a few volunteers lined up already. It should
Yep.
be a good conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. And yeah, if you want to, you know, hear us talk about anything, hear Bob and I mumble into the microphone about any random topic, you can hit us up on Patreon, YouTube. Just drop a comment somewhere. We'll see it. And yeah, maybe we'll pick it up as a topic.
Yeah.
James. Right. And on that note, don't forget, become a Patreon member, take advantage of more great content, and come join our conversation on Discord. And again, you can find links to all of our stuff at rethinkgaming.com.
And remember, think, rethink, play.